In the normal course of you finding out there's a problem to the point where you actually start the work, it can oftentimes be a few months. Unfortunately, what it takes more often than not to figure out if there's a problem is you have to dig what's called an exploratory test pit, which is you physically have to dig an excavation to go down and look at the wood piles. Once you've seen a pile that's deteriorated, and more importantly that the water table is below, you're not going to be able to bring that water table up likely, and therefore you should do a repair. Pit underpinning is a series of small excavations similar to those exploratory excavations that allow you to go down and expose the wood piles. It's all dug by hand, so you have a series of 5 or 6 guys that are digging a hole, bracing the hole as you go deeper with timbers so that people can get inside and do the work as you get deeper. You've got pumps that have to pump groundwater because we have to go below the groundwater table to get to an elevation that we can cut the piles. But instead of just exposing them, we have to go down below the granite blocks that they're supporting. We have to get in underneath the wall to expose every pile that's beneath the wall. When we go in and cut these rotted wood piles, it's usually just the top 1 or 2 feet that's rotted, but we're cutting 4 or 5 feet because that ties back to getting to an elevation that's a few feet below normal groundwater levels and at least at the elevation or slightly lower than the deepest utility. Each pile, as you're cutting it one by one, you're replacing that section you removed of wood with a steel post, and it comes back up to the granite block. And so at the end of cutting out a series of 7 or 8 piles, you have a series of these posts. And once you've posted those piles up, what you then do is you usually put a form up and then encase everything in concrete. And then once you turn off your pumps where you're dewatering to make all this work happen, water table will rise back up and it'll be above the wood piles, and you will have sort of some insurance in the future that you've now got a wood pile 2 or 3 feet below the groundwater table. And so after you've done that all in one pit that might be 8 feet long along your wall, you'll come out of that pit and you'll move to an adjacent pit next to it. So it's a series of pits working yourself all around the building and at interior columns or walls, one by one, and then eventually you have a whole new foundation that's dropped the wood piles below the groundwater table.
So once they do all that for those 8 piles, you do it all over again the next week. So if a building has 400 piles underneath it and you're doing 8 piles at a time and you're doing a pit a week, that's where the months-long process comes in.
You usually will find that the cost to repair the piles beneath that building might be around $250,000. And it can fluctuate up or down, depending on a lot of things, much of which is what you, the owner, will allow the contractor to have for access to the building. So it can be a much more costly process when you are forced to be in a position to still, say, live and access that lower level of the building.
It's never rewarding to find out that a building's being underpinned. What's rewarding for us is that for the homeowner, if they go to sell the building, they can say, our piles are fine, we had them fixed, this building's on a whole brand new foundation.
That I'd like to think that Boston now is ahead of the curve, so to speak, and more proactive in identifying problems and helping people identify problems, and not allowing things to get to a situation where it could become a problem.
We want to show people this is unpleasant, this is expensive. If we weren't monitoring groundwater levels, this would be done on a much larger scale, much more frequently, and it wouldn't just be this one spot on this street, it would be multiple streets in multiple neighborhoods. We can't control what happened 130, 140 years ago, but we can control what's happening now.